It's a strange thing to picture, almost surreal, how a man accused of pulling the trigger in one of the most shocking political killings of our generation is living inside a cell that feels less like punishment and more like a sanctuary designed by anxious caretakers. Before we dive deeper, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a real-life crime story that exposes the shocking truth. While most people imagine jail as cold concrete, echoing footsteps, and the dull hum of fluorescent lights, Tyler Robinson's reality is nothing close. His world is padded, softened, monitored, controlled to the point where even his silence is observed like a fragile artifact. And if you didn't know any better, you'd think the system was housing a diplomat or a witness, not the man accused of ending Charlie Kirk's life. As he lies on a cushioned mattress, thicker than the standard issue slabs most inmates bruise their backs on, the lights above him never fully dim. Not to torment him, not to keep him awake, but to make sure he doesn't disappear from their sight, even for a moment. Guards stand just far enough to give him air, but close enough that one wrong movement could place them at his door in seconds. The irony? They're not protecting themselves from him. They're protecting him from himself. His walls are soft. His floor is padded. His clothing specially designed so he can't tear or twist it into anything harmful. Every edge around him is rounded, wrapped, secured, and while thousands of inmates across the state shiver through nights on concrete floors and metal-framed beds, Robinson's meals are delivered separately, tucked into soft trays without anything that could be snapped or sharpened. He is the one man in the entire facility who doesn't have to stand in line with anyone else, who doesn't have to face the crowded chaos of a standard chow hall. The argument, of course, is safety.
Suicide prévention.
Precaution. But the quiet truth everyone whispers, the truth that disturbs even the officers tasked with watching him, is that he has become too important to lose. It almost feels like the world outside his cell has tilted off its axis. 2 children go to sleep every night without their father. A wife sits in a home that still carries his scent, his laughter etched into the walls like a ghost that refuses to leave. And yet the man who allegedly took all of that away sleeps softer, eats safer, and receives better medical care than many Americans who've never committed a crime at all. As if the system is terrified of the consequences if anything at all happens to him. Long before his cell turned into a padded sanctuary, the moment that brought Tyler Robinson into custody was nothing like the gripping takedowns you see on the news. No armored vehicles, no battering rams, no frantic radio chatter. Instead, it unfolded almost quietly, as if law enforcement were afraid of startling him, afraid that one wrong move might shatter something delicate. It all began when his mother stared at an FBI bulletin and felt the air leave her lungs. The face blinking back at her wasn't just familiar. It was unmistakable. It was her son. She didn't scream, didn't argue, didn't deny. She just called the authorities and confirmed what they already suspected. But Robinson didn't respond with outrage or confusion. He didn't declare innocence or panic about what was coming. Instead, he voiced a very specific fear. Not about the man whose life had ended, not about the family left shattered, but about himself, his own safety, his own life, the worry that police might shoot him. And in a move that defies every expectation of how the capture of an alleged assassin should go, the system leaned in and listened. Negotiations began, the kind that most suspects could only dream of. His father stepped in, and with him came a retired deputy sheriff, a family friend who understood the language of law enforcement. Together, they drafted terms, conditions, reassurances, not about justice, not about answers for the Kirk family, but about Tyler's comfort and security. Every step they arranged was designed to keep him calm, unthreatened, unafraid. So on September 11th, inside a controlled environment far from the chaos of flashing lights or raised voices, Robinson simply walked into custody. No cuffs biting into wrists.
Nos chautid commands. Nos stragel.
Federal agents and marshals treated him less like a man suspected of ending a political figure's life and more like someone who needed a careful escort. He handed himself over, almost peacefully, like a diplomat surrendering after a failed negotiation rather than a suspect facing one of the most serious charges imaginable. And while Charlie Kirk's loved ones were still choosing funeral clothes, while thousands mourned a man abruptly stolen from them, the system welcomed Robinson with extraordinary gentleness. It was a sight that left many wondering who exactly they were protecting, and why. The deeper you look into this case, the more the shadows start to feel alive, as if something behind the scenes is tugging the strings. Officials say the extraordinary protection around Tyler Robinson exists to prevent another high-profile inmate from dying in custody, invoking the ghost of Jeffrey Epstein like a warning carved into the walls of every correctional facility in America. They insist it's not compassion. It's prevention, a shield, they claim, against conspiracy theories that would erupt if Robinson were to harm himself or be harmed by someone else. But if you listen closely, there's an undertone, something no official says out loud but every insider understands. They're not just afraid of his death, they're afraid of what his death might reveal. Leonard Ver, a former warden, described the protocols as dual purpose. Keep Robinson alive and keep the system from embarrassment. But that explanation feels painfully thin when you consider the imbalance. Charlie Kirk, a public figure who lived under constant threat, walked onto that university campus with barely a handful of officers watching over him. Meanwhile, his alleged killer is wrapped in a cocoon so heavily guarded it rivals the safety measures used for witnesses in federal protection programs. Every detail of Robinson's custody is designed to eliminate risk. Specialized clothing that can't be torn into strips. A cell stripped of anything that could be shaped into a weapon. Round-the-clock surveillance so intense that even the way he stands, sits, breathes is logged. Socks, paper, utensils removed or replaced with harmless versions. It's as if every inch of his existence has been engineered to keep him alive long enough for the system to get whatever it needs from him. And yet, for all the privileges and extraordinary protections he's receiving, Robinson meets every question from investigators with silence.
No explanación. No motive.
No insight into whether he acted alone. He offers nothing, holding his secrets with a grip that frustrates every agent working the case. It's as though he occupies the strange space between vulnerability and power, fragile enough that the system treats him like glass, but unyielding enough to keep the truth locked behind his teeth. The contradiction is infuriating. A family grieves. A nation demands answers. Investigators wait for cooperation that never comes. And in the middle of this storm sits one man, shielded by walls softer than justice, refusing to say a single word that might help the world understand why Charlie Kirk's life was taken. If the silence surrounding Tyler Robinson wasn't disturbing enough, the evidence collected around him is even stranger. So unsettling that it feels like this case keeps pulling you deeper into a maze where nothing lines up the way it should. Investigators found his DNA on the rifle believed to be the murder weapon, on a towel wrapped around it, and even on a screwdriver abandoned on the rooftop. These aren't faint traces or accidental contact. They're the kind of forensic fingerprints that point directly at involvement. Hard evidence, scientific truth, the kind that leaves little room for doubt. But just when the trail seems clear, it veers off into something almost surreal. The bullet casings left behind weren't ordinary. They carried engraved messages, political taunts like, "Hey, fascist," "Catch," the sort of thing you'd expect from someone making a statement rather than committing a crime in silence. But mixed in with these were bizarre, childish phrases, including one that read, "If you read this, you are gay, LMAO." Investigators stared at that casing like it was a bad joke from another universe. What kind of assassin carries both political ideology and juvenile internet humor into the same act? The combination left experts unsettled, as though they were staring at two personalities tangled into one. The surveillance footage adds another layer of confusion. It shows Robinson arriving on campus with a level of caution that suggests premeditation, his head tucked down to avoid cameras. But some who analyzed the footage questioned certain official claims, like the description of an unusual gait, which seemed inconsistent with the publicly released images. Details that should be straightforward keep twisting under scrutiny, as if the truth refuses to sit still. Then came the text messages. According to investigators, Robinson confessed, not in person, not under interrogation, but through a series of messages to his transgender partner. Messages so detailed, so perfectly incriminating, that even legal experts raised their eyebrows. They described how he hid the rifle, where he left it, and even joked about the engravings on the bullet casings. But when parts of the conversation were released, there were ellipses, missing pieces. No timestamps on crucial lines. Gaps where context should be. nothing proving when exactly those messages were sent. The questions began stacking up. Were the messages complete? Were they cherry-picked? Why weren't the timestamps shown? And why did the most incriminating lines feel almost too neat, too tidy, too conveniently damning? Instead of clarity, every answer seemed to open another door, and behind each door lay a new question waiting to confront the public. The more investigators tried to stitch the pieces together, the more the seams began to split, revealing questions that refused to be ignored. How did Tyler Robinson reach the roof of the Loxie Center without being noticed? Why was a high-profile political figure, someone who'd received threats for years, left with security thinner than what some campuses assign to weekend basketball games? Students later admitted they'd seen more officers directing traffic at sports events than guarding the venue where Charlie Kirk spoke that night, and that realization hit harder than any bullet. Someone, somewhere, underestimated the danger or chose not to see it. Even as the FBI combed through Robinson's life, searching for ties to extremist organizations or coordinated political networks, they found nothing. No secret group chats.
No underground meetings.
No funding trails. Nothing that linked him to an organized movement. And that void only made things more disturbing. Because if he wasn't guided, pushed, or encouraged by a group, then what led him here? His transformation, from a quiet kid raised in a conservative Mormon household to someone allegedly willing to kill for political ideology, became one of the most unsettling parts of the case. Experts studying radicalization called it isolated combustion, a lone mind igniting from the inside. But even that explanation felt thin. People don't change in a vacuum. Something influences them. Something pushes them. Who or what pushed Tyler Robinson? Meanwhile, the public couldn't ignore the contrast burning right in front of them. Robinson, the man accused of murder, was sleeping in a climate-controlled cell with constant monitoring, protected like a fragile asset. Yet others charged with politically related violence, many on the opposite end of the ideological spectrum, faced harsh conditions, overcrowded cells, and months of pretrial confinement without the faintest hint of special treatment. Whether true or not, a quiet belief began spreading that one side of political violence was handled with gloves, while the other was crushed with fists. Even President Trump weighed in, calling for the death penalty, branding Robinson as pure evil and demanding the harshest punishment the state could offer. But inside his padded cell, Robinson remained untouched, shielded, and uncooperative. The contrast couldn't be sharper. A man whose actions shattered a family, rattled a country, and shook faith in security systems was now the one being guarded more carefully than almost any inmate in America. And as the days passed, one heartbreaking image kept returning to the public's mind. Erica Kirk, standing beside a casket, holding the hands of two children too young to understand what was taken from them. While the public argued over politics and protocol, one voice stood apart from the noise: Erica Kirk's. Grief has a way of bending people, twisting them into something hardened or hollow, but she carried her pain differently. When asked how she felt about Tyler Robinson possibly facing execution, she didn't lash out. She didn't demand blood. Instead, she spoke with a quiet devastation that silenced even the loudest commentators. "I want the government to decide this," she said, her voice trembling but steady. "I do not want that man's blood on my ledger." For her, forgiveness wasn't softness. It was an act of faith, a desperate attempt to stay tethered to the hope that she might one day reunite with her husband in a place where justice and mercy aren't contradictions. While Erica raised a 3-year-old daughter and a 1-year-old son alone, while she navigated bedtime stories and sudden tears and empty chairs at the dinner table, Robinson remained in his protected cocoon, alive, comfortable, refusing to share even a sliver of truth about what really happened that night. Investigators begged for answers that could prevent another tragedy, but he offered only silence, a silence that felt less like fear and more like protection of someone or something still lurking in the dark. And that's where everything converges. The unfair luxuries, the padded walls, the gentle arrest, the meticulous care. All of it begins to paint a picture far bigger than one man acting alone. Robinson isn't being shielded because the system cares about him. He's being shielded because his death, his breakdown, or even a single uncontrolled confession could unravel something explosive. something tangled in politics, perception, and power, something that threats, conspiracy theories, or hidden connections could ignite if he were to disappear before trial. His life has become a piece on a board none of us can fully see. Every safeguarded step, every protective measure, every whisper about preventing another Epstein suggests that keeping Robinson alive isn't just a precaution, it's a priority. Because somewhere in this labyrinth of evidence and unanswered questions lies the possibility that the truth is bigger, messier, and more dangerous than anyone wants to admit. S. Robinson awaits trial, facing charges that could lead to execution by firing squad. America watches. Not just to see whether he'll be convicted, but to see whether justice, real justice, still exists in a country where some killers are treated like threats to the system, and others like threats the system must protect at all costs. The outcome won't just decide his fate. It will reveal what kind of nation we've become, and whether truth still survives inside a system built to hide it.